this point, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Arnie.
How you guys doing?
Out of the
Good morning.
ocean.
Sorry I was running a little late. That's just the part of the course for me lately.
You didn't even show up last year.
I know. Don't say that. If Fuzzy shows up, I'll never hear the end of it. But it was, I'll tell you, last year I'm getting ready to leave for 6 days and my well went out in the morning. So that was not good, and it was Saturday, so I was having a little trouble getting someone to help me pull the pump out and fix it. But anyway, my topic, I'm going to talk about deep water. And when I say deep water, I'm going to classify it in that I'm talking about fishing down deep, but outside of 200 feet of water. I spent a lot of time out there the last 3 years. A couple of reasons that I have is our king fishing, the Kenosha, in this area. I always have to say Kenosha, but probably from Racine to the state line is where I fish out of Kenosha, but I do fish off the Racine end, or the south end of Racine quite a bit. Our structure, it seemed like our kings, the kings that came in latter July and August, were pretty finicky, and we'd have periods where I couldn't get the numbers I was looking for, and that's how I started. I started spending more time out there out of necessity more than just adventure, and now it's turned into more adventure than necessity, because we've had very good fishing at times on our hills, and I'm still going past them and fishing and spending my time out in this deeper water and fishing down deeper. But that's, one of the reasons is I can do it economically. I have a diesel boat, and it's pretty fast, so I spend about the same amount of time as most guys running, and I do it about the same price as fishing within 5 miles of shore. If it was the other way, or if it was my old gas boat, I probably wouldn't do it as much. But when I say the deep water, I'm talking about between 200 and 300 feet of water. I would say that I didn't get to 300 as much, but about 280 was where I was a lot of times turning in that range. I would get to 300 occasionally, but most of the times I didn't need to get that far offshore. Some of the reasons, the big reason that I started spending time out there with these fish is that it seems to be a whole different ecosystem of fish. When I say that, because I'm talking about mid-July on. I'm not talking about May or June. I'm talking about the summer months when this water's warmed up and we're setting up with our 4-year-olds, showing up in our structure, getting ready to feed to make the run, to the shore to spawn. And the fish that are around the hill, or the hills, the structure, the inshore structure, I'd say inside of 7 or 8 miles, seem to be a whole different group of fish than the fish that are out there. The fish that are out deeper, to me, they tend to be active more throughout the day. They have longer feeding periods, and one of the things that I think is they'll have a normal early morning, but it won't be as strong as it is on the hill. The bite won't be as aggressive, but it'll last much longer. And there's several reasons for that, and one of them is because when you go out there, you see different columns of bait. There's actually different ecos of bait fish out there. There's an upper, a middle, and a lower, and that's I think the big reason that those fish stay active all day is that we have these separations in these columns of bait. I gotta go up notes. My brain's not doing too good for some reason. But everybody knows that when these 4-year-olds show up on our structure, we'll have a really good early morning bite, and then they'll tend to shut off. And 4-year-olds seem to be so moody in the way they feed. They feed so aggressively, and then when they shut down, everything around them shuts down. They seem to set the tone for all the fish on that structure. Whereas out in the deep water and down deeper, we don't see the trade-off is you don't see as many 4-year-olds. You really see very few out there, but what that deep water consists of is our younger year class salmon, our kings, steelhead, lake trout, and of all things, mature cohos. I caught more mature cohos in August last season than I ever did. And I don't know why they're there, I don't know where they come from, but there'd be a window when they would be active. And it would always be later in the morning. I caught very few early in the morning, and it would seem like after 9:30 is when they would get active. And then we'd have them active till I'd leave. I normally am leaving the water to come back in around 10-ish, 10:15. And then when I get back out there, it seems like right away, like 1:30 to about 3 or so is when I caught them, and then they disappear. And it would be one of those things I could almost set my watch a few days, like at 9, 10, I'd have my first coho bite, and my next 6 bites would all be mature cohos, or my next 8 bites would all be mature cohos, and then I'd leave and come back at my first 4 or 5 bites to start the afternoon with these mature cohos again. They, cohos come in to spawn. Oh, Fuzz is here.
Will any of these work, Arnie?
I don't know if I'll bring them up, but
There's some nice paddle if you want.
my main heckler.
Oh, we're just getting started now.
And I think part of that reason is if I spent more time out in that deep water earlier than like mid-July, actually it was about, I'd say about the 20, sometime like the 24th, 25th is when I really started, pounding that deep water. I believe if I would have started it earlier, then I would see those 4-year-olds. Because I think they, as they come out of the deep water, they're staging out there, and then they're, it's like they come in a few moves. They must come in a few moves because those cohos are a month behind kings in their spawn, and I'm catching them out there. So that was just kind of something that I found very interesting. To set up the way I would start a day out deep is the best time to get out so you can see how this whole picture develops is in the dark. So we're talking a pretty good run, so you'd have to be leaving pretty early. But by getting out there in the dark, you get to see that whole spectrum of what's going on. And that's, luckily a few times early on, when I started trying to catch these fish, I would start where I could see, be in the dark, and I'd see all that, all the fish, and before that sun started to move, what was going on, and how much bait was there. It's amazing that, like I say, these columns of bait, there would be, from the bottom up 25 feet, there would just be enormous mounds of bait, and you'd see big marks going through them. I thought a lot of them were lake trout. And then you'd see that bait again in the mid-range, which would be anywhere from 100 to 180 down. And then you'd see it again, the high bait, from like 30 to 50 down. And I'd only see all of that if it was dark out. Once the sun started to move, it was just like anywhere else. That bait starts to disappear. Some of it goes to the bottom. The difference is that mid-range bait would be the bait I'd lose. I could still see some mounds on the bottom, and I would still see that high bait. I'm sure you guys have been out there. I don't know how many of you guys spend time out there, but you'll see those high columns of bait balls, like that 30 to 50 down. And a lot of times you're trying really hard to catch fish in them, but there's not a lot of fish there. The only thing that I caught as the day progressed, because the water was warm up there, seemed to be steelhead. The steelhead would come in and out, and that's one of the great things about that little that ecosystem that's going on. Is my normal day would be, we'd start setting up, and it would still be gray or dark, and we'd have just similar kind of action to the guys that were on our hill. Because I'm in communication with them pretty heavy. Their bite would probably be a touch better than mine, but I would catch more fish because I wasn't dealing with the 4-year-olds like they were. The 4-year-olds were, the fish they were hooking up, I'd say about 70% of them, 60% of them were 4-year-olds early. And I wasn't dealing with them. I was dealing with much more manageable fish. But I would start in the same range that they were in, anywhere from 50 to 90 down. Now that would be a mirror image of what was going on 6 miles away from me, but I'm 6 miles further out, and that's why I started to believe that this was a whole different group of fish that we were working with. So I'd set up, I'd have that bite going on, and then as that started to diminish, just like it did on our structure closer to shore, the way I started looking at this was, I would start losing my bite, but the fish weren't disappearing. I still had great, good numbers of fish in that 50 to about 100-foot depth. Fish form and fish form and fish form, and not be able to make a move. Well, then you think, well, they're doing just what they do on the hill, and that's, they fed, now they're full, now they're taking a break. What I was missing for a long time was from like 100 to 180 down, I was seeing fish all of a sudden, 30, 40 minutes after the good bite is gone, all of a sudden they'd start appearing there. And I always thought, well, these are those fish going down. But in reality, what I believe they were the fish that were down coming up. And those were the active ones. Like a lake trout, when he's on the bottom, we always believe, boy, he's feeding. All of a sudden you started seeing suspended marks, your action would stop because they're done feeding and they've suspended off the bottom a little bit. Those fish out there seem to be the exact opposite. The fish that were in that upper range were staying in the upper range, and not active, but the ones that were coming up into that deeper range, like I said, 100 to 180 is where I started really focusing. Those were the active fish coming off the bottom after that morning bite. A lot of them were the younger year class salmon, which I believe they were going to be trout. And that's why I originally was looking at the marks. They looked a little small, and it's one of those things where you don't just go out and put something down 180 feet and believe it's going to catch a fish. It takes you a while to develop. Hey, I'm at 130 down, I haven't caught anything, and there's fish under. Well, I'll put 160 down, 180 down. Pretty soon you have a 230 down that goes off. And in my head, the first several times I thought, oh, it's going to be a trout, it's going to be a trout. And my problem was I was running more rigs down there specifically because I thought they were lake trout. But what I didn't realize is that the majority of them were salmon. And that's where I started to kind of put this whole thing together in my head. Fuzz, don't say anything.
It's a scary place, you don't wanna go over that.
But again, I'm gonna talk about these bait. When I say we had 3 columns of bait, I saw it so many times. The upper column typically was the very small alewife, like this year's hatch, and quite often they'd be those baby perch. But those little baby perch would come and go really bad. You'd have fish with them, and then all of a sudden for days and days and days, no one would cough one up with a little perch in them. But a lot of those upper clouds are always those smaller alewives, which like the warmer water. Then that middle group, I'm guessing, was a variety because it was hard for me to kind of tell, what kind of alewives. But anything I caught, if it was after say 8 o'clock in the morning, that was near the bottom, and like outside of 225, 230 feet of water, typically had those monster alewives in it. And the reason I say is because I would start trying to catch trout off the bottom when I could see that there were good marks down there. And it seemed like they always had those big alewives in them. So I think, I mean, it's just theory, obviously, but it seemed like their year class of this bait was set up in that water column that way. And the fish near the bottom were much harder to catch than the fish that were 30 feet off the bottom. But once you got above 100 feet, they were extremely hard to catch again. That's where I started thinking that these were fish coming off the bottom that were active, and now we can catch them. They fed, they went down, they relaxed, now all of a sudden they're back. But the light, I think, comes and goes so fast there that their time period must be a little bit different because they must not go crazy as long as the fish do like an 80 feet of water. And when I say go crazy, I mean be so active that anything you put in the water is getting hit, or just about anything you put in the water is getting hit. And they wouldn't gorge themselves so fast, and it would be that delayed time period. When I really started looking at that range of fish, it took me, I'd say, I don't want to say I went out there and in 5 days figured it out. I probably, for 3 or 4 years, worked at trying to catch these fish out of necessity, not because I wanted to. And I would say for 3 of those years I was doing it wrong because I was really in my head believing they were lake trout. I was going a little slow. I was using almost primarily 100% rigs that I love for lake trout. And a salmon will hit it, but not as readily as it'll hit other things. So I probably wasted, several hundred hours trying to catch the wrong fish.
And 30 phone calls.
You guys, the one thing I say is that we're so fortunate here on this side of the lake. We normally don't have to run to 250 feet of water to fish. Fuzzy and those guys on that side, they live out there. And they fish that vast, open nothing. When we have structure, why wouldn't we fish structure? I spent 27 or 26 years of my fishing life on the structure. Of that 22, you couldn't pull me off of it because I knew they were there and I knew I could figure them out. And some days I could figure them out, but in a lot of days you can't. But when you see them, you believe you're going to catch them. And we had a few years where we had such tough fishing on our structure and out a little bit that we started having to be out at 140, 150, 160. Well, pretty soon, guess what? 160 turns into 200, and 200 turns into 240, and pretty soon you can't see Pleasant Prairie stack anymore. Now you're just used to not seeing anything but water. But it took a progression of time for me to get comfortable out there. And like fishing with Fuzz helped that because we go and set up, and in Michigan City, no offense, there's nothing there. If somebody would drop a bottle overboard, they would say that that was structure over there and the bottle, because they believe there might be a king hiding behind the bottle, whereas I don't want to get near that. But it's like a whole different mindset once you're in the middle of nowhere. You have to be comfortable with getting out there and believing you're going to catch the fish and figure it out. Like I said, I didn't do it in a day. It took me a long time to figure out I don't know what I was doing wrong, or we evolved into fishing it the correct way. And a lot of that being said, that's where this mid-range that I keep talking about appeared to be the fish that I wanted to go after. Because once I started getting things down there and actually speeding up instead of crawling, I was going so slow, and it gets in your head that once that weight's down 240 feet and you got that flow back, wow, am I going fast? Look at that. And I better slow down a little bit. You keep slowing down, you keep slowing down. Pretty soon you're not moving. You don't realize it because there's just enough cable back there that you think you have it right, but you don't. That's a progression that everybody, I hope you guys try this, will have to grow into or get comfortable with the way everything looks. The way I would approach fishing out there, one of the things is, this is another, these large divers. A lot of people, for some reason, on this side of the lake shy away from them. Some people tell me they've used them for a long time. I rarely see a boat with these big divers on it. And I don't know why. After I started using them, you get comfortable with it. This is a deeper diver, the 124. And both of these right here are set up with the bigger weights. Occasionally, I'll unscrew this and put a small weight in it. But that would be when I was still trying to fish above 100 feet. Once we're going down after these deep fish, I always have these heavier weights in it. But again, this is a 124. Along with it, I never used to use snubbers, and now I use the ripcord because there's so much drag on this. It's pulling when it's pulling down. It seems like without it, I was losing quite a few fish. And it seems like the ripcord definitely helps, the Dream Reaver ripcord. I put 2 different colors on, and I used a smoke one a lot, but the color never seemed to affect the action that I was having on the, I don't know if the color down there just washes out like they say, according to, this is red's the first one to disappear, and how that spectrum just goes as it gets deeper. And I'm just an absolute fan of clear all the time, and I ran it, and then I had something to angle or something, grabbed anything I could find fast, and it didn't seem to matter. So that disproved a lot of that theory that I believe inside, in that inside of above 100 feet, I'm not going to run certain things. I'm always going to go with the clear, just so it's a little more stealthy. The other thing is, I'm a huge believer in fluorocarbon. I did not mess with it a whole lot down there by changing it up to regular mono, just because I believe in it too strongly. So just a standard, a standard diver setup. But what I would do, once I would start setting up for these deeper fish, is I would run my 4 divers. I'd run 2 on each side. And the way I was doing that was one with a 9-foot rod, and the dial turned out to a 3. And then this is a 7-foot rod, and I'd have it set at a 1.5. I run 3 riggers on my boat, and typically your shoot riggers, you want your deepest. I was doing the opposite. I was setting my 2 booms where my deep and my shoot was there, but it really wasn't being effective. I was not putting it in the range. It seemed like it was a little too much for them. They didn't like it as much, because once I started getting down there, I started switching to these bigger paddles. This was, if I can untangle it. This one, this chartreuse, and then this is a bullfrog by Howie. And this I hate, but it works so good I fell in love with it. Frank actually told me which one to use, because I hated them so bad. The few times I'd run them, I tangled everything. This kingfisher will take a sweep like you've never seen in the water. And this is a strong fly, and I'm really reluctant to open my mouth about this, but this one's got UV in it. And I know everybody, that's like the thing that everybody's looking at is UV. because there's definitely something to it. But down there, this one was the only one with UV that I could get to work consistently, this strong fly. And part of it I thought was just the rotator in front of it, but I'd switch it out, and it's still, this one was one of the top ones, and I have these without UV, but the ones with UV were much better. The bullfrog has no UV, but it could hold in there most days. And these were baits that I'd run on my riggers only. I never ran the big paddles too much, or this hokey on any of the divers, just because I was trying to get the depth, and these pull a little bit harder, and I think in my head I didn't think they'd make it down there. They probably do, but I never gave them a fair shake. My standard, one of my standards, and a bullfrog again, and then this is the 10-inch, but this is the 8. They call it Fat Nancy. I don't know if everybody knows that, but this was probably on one of my diver rods. If I went out 112 times, 110 times, it was on there. It would never come off. This is probably the most consistent rig I had from the middle of May on. Yes.
Yeah, when you're running them big paddles off your riggers, are you running them 5 to 10 feet from the wall, or are you running further?
No, I'm running. The question was how far I'm running them off the rigger. The paddle I would run about from me to you, and this one I'd run 20 feet further. All right. Yeah, it's a tang. Now the one problem with once you start setting these divers up like that, I would run. This would be my high diver. This would be my low diver. My low diver, I would set. Most days I would start it out at 350 feet, and I'd always set this one about 30 to 50 feet above it, or 30 to 50 feet less line, and I seem to have less problems. Now you're going to have problems, especially if you are digging out a bigger king or something. But it seemed like those two would run very consistent with the heavy weights. And the one thing I would always do is on my boom. If this boom was going to be set at 175, and my other boom rigger was going to be set at 150. What I typically did was stagger them about 20 to 30 feet apart, even the downrigger weights. If this was my 175, that would be my deep rigger on the boat. This would be my deep diver on the boat, and this would be my deep of the shallow divers. Did I make that? I don't know if I made that clear. Because I see a couple of people shaking their head. Hang on one second. I'll say it again. If this is my deep boom, let's just go that this is this side of the boat. If this was the deepest one, of the two deep divers, 175 feet, 175 feet down would be the rigger. The diver would be 375 feet. On the other side, if this was the 150-foot rigger, this one would be the 350. I don't know why I developed that, but it seemed like if I had my deep boom and my deep diver set together, they work better than if I had a deep boom. This would be one of the shallow of the two deeper the down divers. I just kept them kind of close together in relation. Like one side of the boat would be the complete deep side, and the other side would be the shallower of the two sides. Did I make that clear?
Can you start over? I'll straighten that out for you in my seminar.
Okay.
There's a backstop for that.
Yes.
Your leads off your big paddle, how close to your fly, or what's your lead?
I'll get into that in a second. I'm going to cover all. But the one thing I want to tell you is that once you go to these deep divers, they give you the appearance that they're going to be harder to reel in, and they make you think that wow, because it's so much bigger. When you look at one, look at it next to a regular, the regular size diver that we all use, like a 107 and a deeper diver. It actually planes up faster. Even though the weight weighs more, the surface area of the diver helps it come up faster. That is now going to turn into a big problem if you're running copper. If you're going to run 350, 400 coppers and these deep setups, you got to really be careful. You actually need to set that copper about as far away from the boat as you can get. Because now you're dealing with a lot more wire, and this is planing up a lot faster. It'll come to the surface a lot faster than a standard size diver. Even though the weight is heavier, it comes up. That's like that'll be one of your key problems. You'll definitely not have good words for me the first time it happens. Because now you got wire out there 300 feet, and you're tangled into a 300 or 400 copper, and you grabbed it 75 or 80 or 100 feet away from the end, but that's one of the things that a lot of people are running into problems with. Oh, Buzz, come on. Yeah.
What color did you like, and what did you add to your deeper diver?
Okay, in a second. Anyway, the one thing I was going to say is, out there I've noticed that I would have, and I'm telling you about the way I was setting this boat up, with this side being deeper and this side being the shallower of the two sides, for a reason. It seemed like last year I noticed it more than ever. If I could I'd get set, the first rod that would get hit in a series of bites would always be my deepest rig. And it was this was the deeper of my two studs, always. This Okie. Frank, what's Casper?
Yeah, that's the Casper.
This is Casper. And then I would have my other boom set, like I say, 20 to 30 feet above it. There was a period where I could almost watch, that boom went, I would tell someone, go get over here, it's going to get hit. And as that fish was coming up, that would be my next one to go. Now, they didn't always go together, but more often than not, they did. It was kind of becoming, I couldn't believe how easy it was to get. Once that one got hit, that one was going to get hit, or that one and this diver that was deep next to it would go. You know, a lot of those, especially the younger salmon, are in little, they're in groups. They're not like a 4-year-old. You know, a lot of 4-year-olds are by themselves for a reason, because they're big and they need a lot of food, and no one else wants to be around them. You know, they can't compete with them. They can't, you know, a 6-pound king can't compete with a 20-pound king. If there's one alewife, you know who's getting it. The 20-pounder, he moves twice as fast, you know, everything about it. And you could see that happening. The most prevalent place was with these coals. These mature coals would show up. I had a period at the end of August. I would make bets on what time I was going to catch a coal with the people. Say we won't catch a coal until 9:17 that he wants to take me. You know, so we draw out all the numbers, and you know, I'm going to say it's 9:13 and 9:50, but no one would ever go crazy like an hour ahead of me. They'd always stay right, or they knew I was trying to win. So we'd have these bets, but if it was 9:10 and I said 9:17, between 9:10 and 9:27 we'd catch our first call. They were in they'd get so active, they were like clockwork. It lasted about 10 days. And that was amazing to me. But that was especially where I could see the deep rig go, and I go, he's going to be right here, go over. There he is, you know, and then one of my divers would go, and if it was a high one, go over here, there he go. You know, and they're traveling packs that are coming up out of that column of water. But what I was going to say is, there would be times where I could not get these divers hit, and my two booms would be working the best. And then what I'd do is I would actually pull the deep divers, leave the shallower of the two, and I would go to a 3-rigger set, and then I would put my chute. My chute would be my deepest, and I would leave the same bait, but I never ran 3 large, you know, like this Hokie. I never ran that, or a big paddle. I always went back to the 8-inch. The times I did it, I had trouble. I had a lot of trouble because of what's going on down there. I couldn't run it as far back, and my chute rigger was the main. You know, at that point, your focus in your trolling spread is that chute rigger because it's the deepest. Luckily, I'm now fishing cannons, and what I do is cheat. And then that's how I run my booms. So I run my booms all the way out. Now I can get all 3 riggers within 25 or 30 feet of each other. My chute would be, let's say, 190 or 200 down. My deeper boom would be 180, and my shallower boom would be 170. Those 3 like that, you could see we're working together. You know, not always would the chute go off first, but you could definitely see that the chute was still the best because it was the deepest. And as it was fighting its way up, after it bit, then my 2 booms would go. Though on those days when I had to go to that, I would say that I would catch very few fish on my divers. They just weren't in the right range, or they were not the way the fish wanted them. But that was a big thing for me with these cannons that I have now. is that I could just slide the arm out real fast and get it away from the boat so I wasn't making a tangled mess. And, all right, let me talk about color after I get that straightened out. Color. Fuzz brought up something we always talk about, and I hate to say it again, but it's UV. This is a UV insert on this tape. They don't come standard with it. Frank, you have?
We've got some.
You've got, okay.
And we actually have some already made up to get them to make some.
Okay. And then it's witchcraft tape, isn't it? I'd say it's witchcraft. You have that, right? Tape. But by far, the clear with the UV was my best. Once we were down there. And this chrome one I don't have it on, but this one's kind of beat up. It's been in the water a little bit. Chrome with the UV, and Fuzz is going to talk about the ones that he liked with the UV tape. That's something we were adding, and it definitely made a difference. When you drop this in the water the first time, you'll see I wasn't lying to you. It looks like something you've never seen before. I mean, it's got flash and it changes color, and they're definitely going to be able to see it. You know, talking about the UV, the whole spread of UV has definitely changed. You know, our dirty water. You know, when our water's a little murky, it's obvious that they can find that better. Out there, I ran very few spoons, but whenever I did, it was always a UV. This one actually has UV coating. I coated it myself. This moonshine, even though it's a small one, was one of my best. And I dropped some somewhere on the way here. So, but the SS, the Green Dolphin, was the best one out in that deep water with the UV tape. This isn't it. This is mixed vegetable, but it's
There's a Magnum there, Arnie.
No. With the UV tape on it, that was my best spoon out there by leaps and bounds, and then followed by, I believe, this moonshine. And never the Magnum this size was always the best out there for me. So I know they were matching a little bit of bait profile or bait size. I don't know if it's the whole thing or just the insert that they're seeing, but they were definitely picking that out.
Which moonshine is that?
This was a moonshine, correct?
Which?
This is
Flounder
Flounder
powder.
Flounder.
Green.
Green. Thank you. I know which one it is. Sometimes I just can't tell you. But the spread that I was using in all of that would always consist of a pair of big, either a panel. These two is what I refined it to at the end of the year. And I have to keep going back to that because that's more what I remember is what was last. I can remember shuffling through. I'm a huge believer in the white with glow and the white with the lead tape on it, in the large panel. But it seemed like this one was my surprise. This chartreuse I could not get over how good it worked, and it worked in a lot of places. Inside shallower, but this was my standout from last year as far as baits that I became. I went to a lot more, as a go-to bait. And then this would be followed by this. This in that deep water, you couldn't beat it. I don't know what it was. Yes, sir.
Kings and the cohos act the same out there?
The cohos, I would say, the cohos were the ones that were the most finicky out there. And like I said, the trade-off is I caught very few 4-year-olds out in that deep water, but I think a lot of it was the time of year I was there too late. I was there after they had spent their time out there. I'm going to try it in June this year to see if those kings are out there. I've had mixed results early when I tried it out there, but I think the water's not set up right yet. I think we need that, a strata of warm water and then cold water. And it seems like the high bait of all things dictated how many fish were out there. If I saw big clouds of bait up high, it seemed like the fishing was a little better, or at least that's when it was starting to get better. When I would not see them, I was in areas where I just wouldn't do that well. And it's just like anything else. Even though you're in the middle of nowhere, you feel like you're in the middle of nowhere. They're relating to something underneath them. There's definitely some structure out there. It's albeit very mild, drops, but there's a handful of spots between the state line and 3,500 that go from 260 to, they actually go from 260 to 240 and then back down. So there is a hump down there, and it seems like around that I was having somewhere in that vicinity is where these bait fish were. One thing I'll say about the 4-year-olds out there is that almost all the 4-year-olds I caught were before or it got light out, one, or I dug them off the bottom. Meaning, if we're in 240 feet of water, I had that rigger hit the bottom once in a while. I had, 260, 270 out, which it doesn't surprise me that they're down there. I was surprised I couldn't catch more of them above it a little bit. They're typically rolling around, but it seemed like my 4-year-old would either come right there on the bottom, or they'd come in the early morning, and that would be it. I would rarely catch one in this mid-range that I'm talking about. This would always be those younger year class salmon, and then the coals when they roll in, and lake trout. The steelhead I'd catch were always on my stuff that I was running up high in that bait. That bait that's up high though, a lot of times isn't very productive. I would just run a few rods, a pair of coppers, 100, like a 100-foot copper and 170 for a 180-foot copper. Just I would run them so far away from the boat, and those would be the ones that seemed like would get hit a few times, not good rods, but I was just keeping everybody honest, who was up there. And then I would run deeper coppers, but once you get past 300, you need to get way away from the boat because this turns into an absolute nightmare with these divers, the way they come out. Any questions on what? Okay, I'll take.
Oh, when you got the divers, like say 370, how deep is that running?
370 would be like 150, no, 160, 170. Hang on, I wrote this down. I hit the bar, I had to write it down because I couldn't remember it. Oh, I hit the bottom with a small on a 1.5 setting. I hit it on 190 feet of water with 407 feet of wire out. 407 sounds like a lot, but it's really not that bad. I don't reel it in all the time. I don't get to reel it in, so that's good. A bad story about that. When we go over to the other side of the lake, we fish a few tournaments there. One of them's out of St. Joe, and we have to we run 27 miles offshore to go fish trout. And it's in a deep basin. And the two diver rods that we're running are set at 1.5s, and last year the best one was 850, followed by the 950. And I've had them out as far as 1,200 feet. Now I don't know how far. I don't know if they're still going down, but you just keep letting it out because it won't get hit. And then all of a sudden the trout grabs it, and you try to get away from it as fast as possible. But that's why the 400 didn't sound that bad to me after the 950 went off, and we ran a 32-ounce weight and had it out 1,600 feet once, and caught a fish. So, big reason is the rod. The biggest reason is the reel. There's 700s. There's 700 line counters instead of the 600s a lot of people use.
How much wire do you get on it?
This one's got 2,000 feet of wire on it.
What
I
kind
set
of
them
test
all.
do you use?
The wire? This is 30-pound blood run wire. This is 30-pound blood run fluorocarbon. I've messed with all the fluorocarbons I can find, and this one seems to be like the most abrasion resistant. I've had the best luck with it. I've had trouble with all kinds of them, and it seems this one's giving me the best luck. The one thing I will say is that I was told you could run 30 and 20 and you wouldn't see a difference, and of course I didn't believe it. But even with spoons at 30 doesn't seem to hamper it at all. Yes.
Yeah, you're off your big paddle with your 11-inch. I want to know what pound fluorocarbon you use on your flies and what's your length.
Okay, that's right. I forgot I was able. On this paddle, this is 40-pound fluorocarbon, and it's blood run again. And this is a 48-inch leader. That was one of the hardest things for people to try was this leader. Like, this was a bait that a lot of guys in my harbor used the previous 2 years, and they couldn't get it to work.
And the last one, what pound do you use?
This is 40 pound. But this one, I would never, this is 50 inches exactly, but I would never run it shorter than 50. And I'd run it as far as 70, and it worked. 50 seems to be the number, though, for me. And because this is taking such a big sweep, there's still enough whip on the fly. I always ran it 24, because that's standard for me with this. I always always just add a little bit at 30 and 32. And that was one of the big things last year, that once we stretched it out, really found out how much better it worked. Going back to the setup, the wire, this wire is, like I said, it's 30 pound. I don't know, I know what diameters they are. I think you lose a little bit with the 40 because of the diameter. You can see just, once you get it out a few hundred feet, you can see the wire itself is getting more blowback. I'd like to use a lighter wire, but I don't know if it can take, all the shock that's going on when we're down that, down and with these divers at planing up, we have more fish up on the surface, and I wish they weren't up on the surface, but this diver helps them get up there a little faster. That's kind of what I've been doing with this deep fishing, and I think that fishery out there is definitely, in my eyes, more consistent on a daily basis the later we get in the year. The later we get in the year, going mid-July on, I guess.
You say you run mostly paddles or 11-inch and 8-inch with flies. Sometimes spoons and you ever run anything else or meat?
Had to ask about meat.
Well, I ask because I've had.
No, I know. Meat is like the new problem in this world for me. Because I'm no good at it. I can run it, I can make a mess, and I can occasionally catch a fish. But I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm saying I am no good with it right now. We had a big discussion last weekend. There's something wrong with the meat that I'm running. Don't know what it is yet, but it's not right. I'm either getting bad stuff from friends, or I need a new dealer is what I need.
Oh, take it back.
The other thing is, I would say 90% of the time I fish with flies. Rotators, paddles, I definitely I fish with flies. I think they're more productive. Out there, again, I've talked so much about current and so much about direction in the last years, but out there it is paramount that you pay attention to the way everything looks in the water. And the simplest way is with a pro. If you do not have a pro, the second easiest way is stand directly behind your downrigger, and if that wire is not perfectly straight behind it, you are not doing it right. Get it as straight as you can get it, and at least you got now your bait's running consistent the way it looks. Most people say they do it, but I know they don't. Because when I'm going the same direction as another boat, my cable's over there. And when I keep tweaking it, all of a sudden I got it behind me the way I want it, and I'm leaving everybody. So I know everybody says they go out there and fish deep. I don't see anybody out there. I spend 7 days a week out there, all day out there, and I never see another boat. So a lot of people say they do it, but I really don't believe a lot of people are doing it. When you can go for 5 or 6 days and not see anybody. There are a handful of charter boats out of North Point that will end up, I'll see them to the south, and there's a handful of us out of Kenosha that'll do it. Myself, I'm the only one that probably does it when it's not necessary, but just because I'm starting to really enjoy that fishery out there. I know I'm going to get X amount of bites. I know they're going to bite all day. A lot of it's making it easier on me. I'm not sweating it all day. And that's kind of, how I've done everything in fishing, is I'm always trying to find the easiest thing for the most bites, instead of, saying, hey, I'm going to go catch big ones. I'd love to be able to say that. I just don't do that, Yes, sir.
How heavy are your downrigger weights?
I'm using 18-pound weights. Sorry. The cannon can pull it 250 feet a minute at 20-pound weight. I don't know if anybody knows I'm pushing cannon a little bit. Sorry, Fuzz. But that's definitely the weight makes a big difference. A 10-pound weight has got so much blowback. At 12-pound, seems like 15 and heavier is what you need to mess with it out there.
Guys, make sure you get your tickets. Arnie's giving that downrigger away.
Yeah.
What were the water temps like?
Down there.
Yeah, and when you were really hammering them.
They were always in the 40s.
In the 40s.
Yeah. I almost,
Were you noticing big changes in water temp?
no, it was always gradual. It would be like a slow, then it'd get, once it got to like that 55, then it would drop. But before that, it seemed like it was just a real gentle, change in the column. That would be also, you'd never see those big balls of bait below where it was like 57, 58, 59
Sure.
up high. They would never go into that colder water. And it's always those little tiny alewives. You know, I don't cut these fish open because I know what they're eating, but they cough it up in the cooler, so I know. You know, early I'd see little bitty ones in the morning, and then I wouldn't see any all afternoon, so I know they weren't up attacking those bait. And the problem is, I spent way too much time over my life trying to catch those fish that were up there that weren't feeding, just because I didn't want to keep dumping everything deeper and deeper. Last year, I was going to say direction, by far my Northwest troll commanded. That was the money troll all the time, it seemed like. I don't know. And inside of that, I always like a northeast, east of some form, but never, I had really bad luck going to the south last year. As a whole, it seemed like I'd always truck out to the east or slightly to the northeast, and then when I get to where I wanted to go, I'd take it back to the northwest. You know, it didn't seem like I had to be at a 300. It seemed like a 330, just enough west to get everything straight, and that seemed the way they wanted it. Out there, the other thing is I quit running to 180 and then trolling to 240. I'd run to 240. We're all guilty of that in the charter business. Because guess what? It's about making money. And when that thing's running hard, you're throwing it out the window. But I would, every day I'd push it a little further, and pretty soon I wanted to be out there so I could see what, the story would be told first thing in the morning for my whole day. If it looked good, it would be pretty good. If it looked like hell, it was terrible, you know. And I'm not saying this was I went out and pounded them day in, day out for 50 days, but I caught a lot of fish for those 50 days that I was, or 35 or 40 days. There would be very few days where they weren't active for a good period of the day. That's why I'm trying to talk a lot about it, because we don't do it on this side. You know, we want to be around some kind of hill. You know, Kenosha, we run to the hill. Racine, they run to the hill. You know, North Point, they run to their hill. You know, Waukegan runs to the South Reef. It's like we're made to run to something that goes up and down. And even though it's vast out there, it's a heck of a good fish. Yes.
What was your typical best down speed out that deep?
Down there on my probe, it would be between 2.0 and 2.2. That's on a depth rater. So it's a little, I think it's calibrated, mine's calibrated a touch slow, as opposed to like a fish hawk, because there would be other guys would be talking, they were always a little faster, you know, than that on their numbers, but we would pretty much be staying with each other.
How do you get the depth rater to work that deep?
I was using the wire with the filament inside it. You know, I don't know if you have that.
I've had a lot of problems.
Really?
I'll talk to Matthew again.
Well, it probably only took me 10 tries to hook it up right. And then once I did, you know, that wire, what I ended up doing was putting that plastic liquid tape all the way around the whole thing after I had it. You know, that paint, you could paint it.
I've rewired them 50 times.
Whoops. But a lot of days I wouldn't use I got away from using the probe after a while, just because the way I look at everything tells me, I get so accustomed to it. I know, hey, that's out 350, I like the way it looks, but the probe is definitely the way to go. I always tell, hang on, Buzz, quit heckling. I always tell people, skip going fishing on Friday, take the money from the gas and buy the probe for Saturday. Because it'll help you that much, I believe with probe is something that really is a tool that, if you don't have one, I think you're missing a little bit. It just simplifies everything and helps you get everything aligned much faster. Anything else? Okay, Frank.
One last thing that was kind of interesting, last fall I spent 2 weeks in British Columbia visiting a lot of manufacturers, fishing and a few other things. Dreamweaver makes a little flashlight, looks like this. It's a UV reflective flashlight, and if you use it for like supercharging baits, I mean, it really gives them a real quick charge because it's using the UV light. But one of the other things that it does is it can detect UV reflectivity in different lures. So I mean, all you have to do is go to the tackle box and say, hey, that's highly UV reflective. So is this guy. Anything with that UV is gonna show up a lot deeper. And for years, this particular hot spot has always worked good deep. Never understood why until I saw at the factory and asked them, and they've been putting a UV stabilizer in it for 20 years. Nobody even knew it. So that is gonna show deep a lot better than most of the other ones. And then show it at that frog one. Flip the other side. That's the frog. So you can see a lot of UV reflectivity in a lot of these different baits.
Anything else, anybody? Yes, sir.
You run any glows down there?
This is a glow, but all the tape, you know, that crushed glow. So I run just. My go-to baits aren't spoons. My go-to baits are always flasher fly, rotator fly. I use spoons in a lot. I fish with tons of them, but I always believe I'm going to make money with a flasher and fly. That being said, that's where speed becomes very critical. But I've been fishing that way so long that messing with the speed is just part of, tying your shoe or whatever your routine is. If I was an animal, I'd be easy to kill. I do everything the same, everything. And I'd be super easy to find and kill because I do it the same. I do it in the morning as I go out fishing. I almost set the boat up identically every day. This goes in first, this goes in second. So a lot of that is because the things that I'm dumping in the water are my speed indicators that I look at first. I like glow in the dark, but I'm not 100% always sold on it. I don't think they need help. They're picking out something that we don't even think they're picking out. I did, of course, have to have a fly tie where instead of wrapping all the way around for you guys that tie flies, maybe, instead of wrapping it all the way around with the UV, I had the guy bunched up on top, on one side, and tied off. In the early process, but it definitely seemed like that one was, was changing the profile of the fly, what they were seeing, and that UV was on one side instead of all the way around. And they seemed to like that a little bit. I don't know if it was just a fluke, but I had a few flies tied that way and it seemed to work better. I got that from river fishing when I was a kid. A hair jig that's bushy all the way to the back never seems to work as good as one that's got that tapered profile after it's wet. And the same goes with with a lot of our flies. The more beat up they are, the better they work, and they lose their tinsel at the back. So it's got that profile, more of a minnow. It goes back down at the bottom. Maybe I'm nuts, but I think they see that. I think they're looking at. They're not looking. I don't believe they look at this whole spoon. I think they look at something on it, a tiny edge or something they're seeing. Whether it be by their lateral line, their back that day, maybe their belly. They're not looking at that spoon going through the water, because why wouldn't we be able to fish with body baits and just cream them? How much better can they look? They look better than the alewife does. And we still don't get them to work that good. But that's just my style of fishing. Anybody else? Any other questions? Oh,
Getting back to the Death Raider, you said 2.2, 2.3.
yep.
And the current generally in Lake Michigan runs north to south, so your best direction is generally northbound, either northeast or northwest.
Yes, this year especially it seemed that way.
So you're reading it into the current at 2.2, 2.3.
Correct.
Is your speed over ground about the same?
I never even pay attention to it.
Okay.
That's just
You're
reference
just
for
looking
later.
ground speed.
Yeah.
Okay.
And more, I look at the way everything's laying. Like I said, the simplest method is get that downrigger cable straight. If it's cocked over, you're not right. Maybe I'm wrong, but if it's swept to one side or the other, even though you want to go the way you're going, you're fighting a losing battle a lot of times, because now nothing's running the same. The downside of all these probes is that they swivel. So now you're getting speed, and I believe that even though we're going forward, that probe may be turned a little bit into that current. I always would like to see somebody make a probe that has a direction, tell me what direction the probe's facing. I think that would be huge, 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 as opposed to speed. When you get the speed right, you're not getting hit, and your cables are cocked over. It's giving you speed, but it's not giving you that speed that you want. Those are the two things that, if you can marry those two together, that seem to be the big ticket, especially the further you get down. Once you get past 100, feet down, it starts to get a little tricky with everything. But I think that those fish are so active, you can get away with a lot of mistakes. I really do. Yes?
How do you figure out what depth you want to fish? You said you're trolling on a north to a northwest troll. You're not going to cover a lot of depth.
No, I'm not. I'm fishing a column of water. I'm spending time looking at that. What would happen, like I said, what would happen is I'd see these fish, 140, 160, 180 feet down, and I always believe they were just settling. And now I believe they're not. They're the ones coming up the bottom. But those are the active fish, and as long as and once I started marking them, I knew I would start having some action. I didn't know how good, but if I was not marking them in that band, I would not. A lot of times
just
in the
run
morning,
deeper then?
I didn't
You know
matter.
what I mean? You
One or the other.
looking on the graph while you're cruising.
Yeah.
And say, okay, there's.
In the afternoons especially. In the morning, I would just shut down because there was bait and fish. It seemed like and a lot of for big stretches that I was running. In the afternoon, I typically run until I see them. My graph reads that I can read fish at 30 miles an hour though, and I cruise at about 25, so I'm looking at it all the time. And once I start seeing them in that range, it would never be marks like they would be on the structure. They'd be spaced out, but that's because I wasn't shooting a wide beam. I was shooting a narrow beam, but it was grabbing them. And that would, once I saw them consistently down 120, 130 feet, then I stop and start fishing, all the way down to like that 190. It seemed like once I saw one at 120, there'd be one at 150, and another 180, and there's a guy at 200, another one at 130, I'd stop and start. And I would though make an eastbound troll to start by habit. Just couldn't run out and turn and go west. It just didn't make sense to me yet. So I'd fish out a lot, but a lot of it was me getting set up and looking at the graph to see where, as I made that 25 or 30 feet of depth, I'd already have, hey, that was where I saw the best marks. I got hit here, I got hit there, and then whip around. That's where I think a lot of that was where I started to really tweak the speed the way so it looked perfect. And last year out there, Northwest seemed to be the troll. I'm not going to go into a long talk about current because I'm not 100% sure if I'm right. But in this area of the lake, our current runs offshore, from shore out, more than shore in, and that's because of wind point. It's forcing that current out, and it's running at I always believe that I like to fish to the southeast on the hill, which I do like to fish to the southeast on the hill. The difference is, a lot of times I'm fishing with current, not against it, and it all came to light, when I started using the probe 10, 12 years ago. A lot of stuff that I did, I believe I was a little wrong, but I think our currents are much worse than they used to be. And that's this clear water we have, that it creates more current. And we deal with current now in June when we never dealt with it in June. We used to deal with it only in August when we had those big temperature inversions in the water. But out there, that northwest troll was like, if I caught some going to the east, I knew I was going to get them going to the west. But it would be a northwest troll typically. Anybody else? Anything? Not you, Fuzz. Anybody but Fuzz. Yes?
You ever run any Dodgers down deep, or is it just flashes?
You mean metal Dodgers?
Yeah.
I do occasionally. But that was one of my problems early, because I was trout fishing. I'm old school. If I'm going to go trout fishing, I'm grabbing a metal Dodger. We can have a fight if you want about that one. I love metal Dodgers for trout. And that was one of my big problems. I was dragging all this trout stuff, and salmon will hit it, but they're not going to hit it as readily as they were hitting a lot of this other stuff. And I wasn't covering any ground. I'm staying in one spot. Anybody else? Anything? Yes?
What strand wire do you like? What strand wire?
Strand is a 7-strand. It's that, like I said, it's a 7-strand flood run. One last thing. Frank has these divers made. You can't just buy one and it be like this, right, Frank? and the tape is at Witchcraft. I encourage you to buy it and give it a try, and you'll see there's something to it. I'm not sure what yet, but it definitely made a difference. So, anything else? Any questions about the setup? All right. Thank you. One last thing. Can I pitch my turn? I'm the chairman of the Jeffrey Morris tournament this year. We fish out of it. It goes off June 20th, 21st out of North Point Marina. We have two divisions, pro and an AM division. The pro division fish 2 days. The amateur division just fishes one. Pro entry fee is $575. The amateur entry fee is $125. We have a award ceremony after the tournament. Food, beer, soda, everything is included. We give you the amateurs get a bag with $70 or $80 worth of stuff, 4 free T-shirts and food. So you pretty much get your chance at the prize for free if you look at it that way. I have some save the date cards if anybody would like them. I hope you guys will attend it. We're doing a few things differently this year. We have a sub tournament where on the night of the professional meeting, we have a sign up, and all the pros that want to get into it will get in the tournament, get in the sub tournament. It's called Operation Double Team. It's a military event, so everything's got to be military themed. We're going to draw their names out of a hat. They're going to go on a board, 1 to whatever, and then at the amateur meeting, we're going to have the same opportunity. And what's going to happen is we're going to pull the names out. You're going to be coupled with a pro team. Your two scores are going to be combined, and that's going to be a whole separate sub tournament. Well, what we're trying to do is create a little bit of a working attitude. It's not just the tournament. There's a lot more to it. You learn a lot. I'm lucky that when I went over to the other side, like, this is stuff that I've learned from guys like Fuzzy, from a lot of the guys that I'm friends with over there, because it's a whole different way of fishing for us here that are so lucky that we have structure. But that deep water stuff is that's how they all cut their teeth doing that. Unfortunately, unfortunately for them, we have structure, so we didn't have to ever do it. But that's one place I learned a lot about it. That's what this tournament, that sub tournament we're trying to create. So if you get coupled with the right pro, well, you're gonna either learn a lot of stuff that you didn't fast, or you're gonna be able to help him with that. I know, I'm looking forward to it because I just want to see what other people do. I always want to know what someone else is doing, and hopefully it'll help you become a little bit better. That's not looking for you to take 100 things out of this, just one thing. If you get one good thing or 2 good things and you catch 10 fish, hey, maybe you won't badmouth me. Yes.
I've fished Jeffrey Morris the last 3 years, and it's a really well-run tournament. This new concept you described last week when I was here, after I thought about it, I said, hey, it's starting to sound like pretty good, but if I remember correctly, there's more amateurs than pros.
Right.
If more amateurs want to sign up, are you going to?
Well, we're going to do in that case, because the pro division definitely has less, we're going to have less boats. When the pros sign up, they're going to have the opportunity to get in for a second round. So those that do, which I've probably talked to 20 guys that fish the pro side, everybody's just going to we're not too smart, we keep throwing money down. And what we'll do is we'll just keep pulling amateurs out, and that pro may be coupled with 2 teams. So there might be a little bit of, there, but the pros got to ante up again. I don't see that it's going to be a problem, because everybody's still got to go out and catch the fish. Anybody here that does it, if you get coupled with Fuzz, do not go down to the boat, because you're going to just keep grabbing stuff. Fill your bag, because that's what I do when I get there. He's got bins and bins of stuff. So, there's going to be some really cool advantages. There's a lot of good guys that fish this tournament on the pro side. From Milwaukee, Racine, Kenosha, North Point, Waukegan, Michigan City, St. Joe, Saugatuck. We get guys. We're going to have a few more. It's a good opportunity not only to learn something or maybe teach somebody something, but you get to interact with them. Like I said, it's a tournament. We all want to win. Everybody wants to win. But at the end of the day, we're just fishing. And you're gonna learn more hanging around having a beer and something to eat, because inevitably the guy that did not win is talking so much, you're gonna learn exactly what he was doing. And maybe that's something you never did. And one of my good friends, Jim Mueller, can't quit talking after the first day, so you don't have to wonder where he was. He'll tell you. He just can't shut up. And it's like, oh, Jim, everybody's there because you couldn't shut up last night. Because he's so worked up of what went on, he just keeps talking. So, I mean, that's what happens to all of us. You know, at the end, it's over, so what's the difference? We're spouting off where we caught him or where we couldn't, you know. And that's the thing, I want everybody to know, the misconception about tournaments is not really who wins. Everybody thinks it's who won, and I gotta win, and that may have been the case the way it was years ago. It's not that way anymore. Everybody's pretty open, and, you know, I would say the night before you're not gonna hear a lot, but after it's all said and done, everybody's willing to talk about where they were and what they did, and you're gonna find out what they didn't do. You know?
Arnie, talk about the cause a little bit, because
I'm
this
sorry.
tournament's so different than the other ones. A lot of them, the money that, like on the Michigan side, the money that's raised goes to visit convention barrels or raise a fish in the classroom, and there's a lot of schools that the steelheaders clubs and, you know, the salmon clubs donate money to, and they set up classrooms and they can raise salmon in classrooms. The kids actually raise them and all the way to smolt stage, and they feed them every day. A lot of stuff but this is a different special cause, and already talked about that.
This tournament is called the PFC Jeffrey Morris. Private first class for non-military. I'm not military, by the way. So Jeff was killed, this is the 10-year anniversary. He was killed 4/4 of 04 over in Iraq. And Kirk started the tournament and has run it for 9 years, and then last summer he asked me to help him. I've always been on the committee, but I'm a little more active, I guess what you'd say, in the fishing community. And this year, any of our proceeds are going to an organization called Oscar Mike. And if you want to look at their website, which I encourage you to, it's oscarmike.org, OSCARMIKE.org. And what that is it's a group of disabled veterans. And their whole goal, Oscar Mike in military is like the last thing they say on the radio. Like if they're in a position and they get orders, it's Oscar Mike, and that's it. And that means we're on the move. So they've taken that theme on, and what they do is they take anybody that's a disabled vet. You know, some of it's, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder. Most of it, though, is a physical disability. I visited their place, and it's kind of neat. It's neat in one way when you see 10 guys that are all disabled that are happy from the minute you get there to the minute you leave, because guess what? They're still living, and that's their goal is to get people that are vets that are disabled out doing something, get them on the move, so they fight. You know, that depression's a big thing, and that's who all our proceeds are going to. 100% of the proceeds that we give them go directly to that. There's no administration, there's no nothing. That's one of the reasons we're tied to them and partnered with them. But I encourage you to take a look at that. The other thing is, the Jeffrey Morris has been around for 9 years. And I'm here pitching for you guys to come fish it, because we want it to get bigger. But the reality is that Kirk Morris kept this tournament going. It's the biggest tournament on this side of the lake. It's I think it's the biggest guaranteed tournament on Lake Michigan. And if it wasn't for people like that, we wouldn't have tournaments. He always thinks it's you know, he wants to say thank you to all the fishermen. But reality is we should say thank you to him at some point, because it's a big job to keep it all together. You know, Euchre went away, it's never coming back. Without support, you know, this one's not going to go away, but we're looking to have a great event this year with the 10-year. Thank you. Anybody please come up, grab one, and I hope to see you.